Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a question that sits right at the heart of pretty much all our political debates. Are people, at our core, good or bad? We're going to explore how the answer to that very question has shaped our world, looking at it through the lens of a really fascinating essay by Francis Fukuyama. So let's just start with the big one, a question philosophers have been wrestling with for thousands of years. Are we born with a nature that we should embrace, or is it something that we need to control? And look, this isn't just some dusty academic debate. The answer has massive real-world consequences. It literally shapes everything from the laws we write to the governments we build. All right, Section 1, a question of nature. To get to the bottom of this, we've actually got to go way back to ancient Greece, to a guy you've probably heard of, Socrates. So Socrates made this really crucial distinction. He drew a line between what's true of us by nature, the permanent biological stuff, and what's customary, the things we learn from our society. See the difference? One's fixed, the other is flexible. And this single idea, believe it or not, sets the stage for this whole enormous debate. Okay, on to Section 2, the philosopher's dilemma. And this is where we get this really interesting thought experiment called the state of nature. Basically, what were we like before society, before all the rules? And at the center of this whole thing are these two English heavyweights, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Hobbes, in his masterpiece Leviathan, took this almost scientific approach. He figured, hey, if you want to understand politics, you've got to understand people first. And his conclusion? Let me tell you, it wasn't exactly optimistic. He famously argued that without some kind of strong authority, our natural instincts would lead to a constant, terrifying war of all against all. For Hobbes, everything boiled down to one master passion, the fear of a violent death. He believed that fear is so incredibly powerful that we willingly make a trade. We give up some of our freedom in exchange for security, creating a powerful state, the Leviathan, to protect us. But then, about a century later, another thinker, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, comes along and just flips this whole argument completely on its head. He said, no, you've got it all wrong. He believed we're actually good by nature, timid and solitary. For Rousseau, it's society that messes us up, creating all the envy, competition, and violence. So you've got these two totally opposite views, right? But here's the wild part. For all their differences, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau all started from the exact same assumption, that humans began as isolated, rational individuals who later chose to form societies for their own benefit. This big idea is called primordial individualism. Which brings us to Section 3, what science says now. Because for hundreds of years, this was all just a big philosophical thought experiment. But today, we can ask a new question. What does the science actually say? And this is where things get really, really interesting. Because it turns out, when you look at the mountains of evidence from biology, anthropology, and archaeology, the picture that emerges is completely different. So, here's the bombshell. The scientific consensus today is that the state of nature, full of isolated individuals, well, it never existed. It's a myth. We are hardwired to be social, to favor our family and friends, and to follow group rules. And on that whole question of violence, yeah, it seems Hobbes was probably a lot closer to the truth. Let's just zoom in on one of these key ideas for a second, patrimonialism. It's a fancy word for something we all get. It's that deep biological instinct to favor our friends and family. It's just baked into who we are. And this is a huge deal for politics, because as Fukuyama points out, building a modern, fair, impartial state means we have to work against our own natural instincts. That impulse to hire your cousin or help out a friend is always there, constantly threatening to undermine our institutions. It just doesn't come naturally to us. All right, Section 4, the Great Denial. So, if the science on this is so compelling, why did the very idea of human nature become such a political hot potato? Why is it so controversial to even talk about? Well, the answer is complicated, and to be honest, it has a pretty dark history. Throughout the 20th century, arguments about biology were twisted and misused to justify some truly awful things. Scientific racism, sexism, oppression. So yeah, that created a deep and frankly very understandable suspicion of any claims rooted in our biology. But it's not just that dark history. There's also a deeper philosophical conflict at play here. At its heart, modern liberalism is all about protecting individual autonomy, our freedom to choose our own path and define our own life. But the concept of human nature pushes back on that a little. It suggests that some things about us aren't chosen, they're just given to us by our biology. And for some people, that can feel like a direct threat to that freedom to define ourselves completely. And that right there, that's the fundamental tension we see playing out in so many of our biggest cultural debates today. It's this collision between the ideal of limitless, total personal autonomy and the reality of our biological makeup. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, our post-human future. Because this ancient philosophical debate, it's not just history. It is becoming more urgent than ever, and it's all because of one incredibly disruptive force: technology. You see, for all of human history, we've had to accept our nature. But we are rapidly approaching an era where we can actually edit it. Technologies like CRISPR genetic engineering could allow us to literally design future humans, to make them more intelligent, maybe less aggressive. We're on the verge of taking control of our own evolution. It's mind-boggling. And yet, there's this timeless warning from the Roman poet Horace that just kind of hangs in the air here. He said you can throw nature out with a pitchfork, but it'll always come running back. Our nature is a resilient, complex thing, and trying to engineer it away might have unforeseen, maybe even dangerous consequences. And that leaves us with a final, profound question for our future. As we gain this power to reshape our own biology, who gets to decide what humanity becomes? Is this going to be used for the good of all of us? Or is it going to create a brand new biological divide between the wealthy who can afford it and everybody else?